Good afternoon. Hello, my name's Art Lander. Welcome to our seminar today. We're going to be talking with Scott Sklar about renewable energy. Yesterday, I read in the Wall Street Journal about oil companies and how the price of oil has fluctuated. And I got to thinking about how difficult, even though the price may be much lower, and you're thinking, oh, well, this will be a problem for renewable energy because now prices of gas and oil are cheaper, it'll be more competitive. And I got to thinking about what about this volatility? How can a company plan with this kind of volatility on their energy pricing when you compare with solar or wind? And then also I got to thinking about transportation costs. First of all, now all the tankers, as of today, are full with oil, and so the cost of trying to obtain transportation, these tankers, has just skyrocketed. And then you think about the equipment that's necessary. Here in the United States, you have light crude being produced, but yet the factories to refine that, the refineries, are all needing heavy crude. And so it's very interesting to me about the cost structure and the future of renewable energy and how it's going to compete with the traditional oil and gas and other coal energy fields. And so I'm very happy today to have Scott Sklar with us, who's a professor at George Washington University, to talk about renewable energy. And Scott, it reminds me when we had lunch the other day, we were talking about the cost of fuel for a car versus the cost of electricity for an electric car, and how really the electric car per mile is cheaper. And I found that absolutely stunning.
Absolutely.
Scott, would you like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the area of renewable energy?
Yes, I have a presentation and I'm going to flip over to it, hopefully deftly here. And share screen. Okay, let's go. Excellent. And so I have both a company that's 20 years old that I actually help different clients select what blend of renewable energies they're going to use. And that includes all the high value energy efficiency, all the renewables, and all the different kinds of energy storage. And then I teach 3 interdisciplinary courses on sustainable energy at George Washington University. And I am energy director of GW's Environmental Energy Study Institute, EEMI, as well. So there I am. So I love using this chart. And this is at a DLR Europe, and this just shows how much energy is available on our planet. We have 2,850 times the energy we need coming from the sun, 200 times from wind, 1 time from hydropower, 2 times from marine energy, tidal and wave, and ocean currents and ocean thermal, 5 times from geothermal. We have 9,000 degree temperature under the earth. And remember, most of our electricity today on this planet is creating heat to create steam, turn a steam generator. That's what oil, gas, nuclear have in common, actually. And then biomass, 20 times, and that's renewables. That's not growing any plantations. So we have a huge resource on this planet. And again, it's not economic to access it all, but you don't need a lot when you have all that resource. So I put in sort of a list of things I thought people should know. The amount of solar energy that hits the earth in a single day could power the world for 27 years. The second one, I included a Forbes magazine article from May of last year showing that all the renewables are competitive with coal and oil. And frankly, now in some cases, natural gas. So we're going to see that. And 2017 was the first year that solar attracted more global private sector investment than any other energy technology. And also 2017, solar powered 1/3 of all newly generated worldwide power, and with wind, 50% of all worldwide power. So we're seeing some big changes on our planet. And then I put the 2018 when California produced a record peak the largest share ever, lion's share of their electricity. Remember, California is the sixth largest economy in the world. I'm sorry. There are many studies. I give 36 out to my classes. This one is the Institute of Local Self-Reliance, and this is their study of, with resources the states have today, renewable resources, and technology we have today, this is how much they could produce economically. And as you can see, 32 states can be totally self-sufficient. And by the way, this does not include marine, tidal, or offshore wind, which would sort of get the East Coast above 100. But we have transmission lines, and we can send our excesses to these other states. So it's pretty astounding, the resource base we have. 5 towns as of 2017 were entirely powered by renewable energy: Colorado, Kansas, Vermont, Alaska, Missouri. So I wanted to show you that. And number of towns and cities that committed have more than doubled to 46. That was in 2017. Rhode Island was the first state to commit to 100% renewables by 2030. That was a report in January 2020. The Energy Information Administration, which is part of the US Department of Energy, it's our statistical entity, and says renewables to overtake gas in US power mix. And that's a January 2020 report. So they're expecting renewables to go from 19% by 2019 and 38% by 2050, surpassing natural gas. And that's no shocker, as we'll see momentarily. I put in a pretty chart from the Renewable Energy Fact Book put out by Bloomberg New Energy Finance and the Business Council Sustainable Energy, and just showing the change from the top circle in 2010 to 9 years later. And as you can see, coal's gone way down and is going to go further down. Renewables have more than doubled. Nuclear is static, and natural gas has increased. So that's the play. That's the trend. This is out of 2019 last year, and advanced energy, that's all renewables and storage and all that stuff, hit a $1.6 trillion market, 4 times as fast as the global GDP. And again, that's not a shocker. And this is a nice chart I found out of Bloomberg New Energy Finance from 2004 to 2018. And as you can see, the investment, this is private sector investment. This is not government funding, to show how much investment for all the renewables and energy efficiency. And as you can see, solar on the bottom, and then the next one, wind is blue, are the big winners. But you're seeing marine technology and biofuels and others start making a show.
The reason why is, I guess, is because the cost of manufacturing the solar panels.
Well, the solar and wind, and also the cost of financing is less, as we'll get into momentarily. In the United States, just remember though, a very little bit of our electricity now is generated by oil, about 5%. So we really don't compete against oil. We do compete a little bit against gas, but that's about it. And you can see that we're starting to overtake gas. So this takes a look at the US generating capacity conditions over the last 9 years. And as you can see, solar went from 3.5%. Now these are additions. We're talking about new electricity coming online, to nearly 40%, and wind over 30%. So that's really, or approaching 30%, I guess, and natural gas slightly over. So, I mean, that's what you're beginning to see in the US market, how it's changing. The other drivers, aside from costs, are power reliability. This is 2003, when a tree limb fell in Ohio and knocked out 8 states from 3 days to 3 weeks, causing $85 billion worth of economic loss. I get called in a lot of times with on-site renewable generation and battery storage to get rid of under voltages, swells, over voltages, which we call surges. That's why you have surge protectors, and transients, which are spurts of electrons that come out of the socket, and all 3 ruin digital equipment. And that didn't matter 20 years ago, but now everything's digital, not just computers and microprocessors. My refrigerator is, my stove is, my thermostat is, everything is. And on-site power and battery banks are one way to more cost-effectively address that. Batteries have come down hugely of costs, but they also have a very set of unique values. This is the best chart I can find on that, to help the transmission operator, which is the green arc, in not having to have spinning reserves, which are generally old gas and coal generators just idling, getting ready when someone turns on their air conditioning. Frequency regulations, which are the surges and sags along the lines, voltage support, the bottom utility, similar things. They get transmission and distribution line backups particularly during the summer when everybody has their air conditioning on, meaning electricity just flows less through the lines and can't get where it needs to be. And then for customers, backup power, absolute reliable power, use of solar and wind when you need it. You get charged if you use a certain amount of electricity over that amount for commercial industrial. And you can, by the way, offset that higher charge as well as time of use on your bill rates like peak power and seasonal power costs. So batteries are multiple approaches these days, and we have advanced software to handle all of that. This is the best chart I could find. It's out of IRENA, which is an international entity by the G8. And forget the cents per kilowatt hour, because we're talking about 2014, but starting about 6 years ago, you can see that the brown bar is where things become competitive. And you can see biomass, which is generally biogas from manure and sewage and gasification or biogas from food processing waste and contaminated grains. Absolutely pretty much cost effective. Geothermal is, of course. Hydropower, oldest renewable is. Solar photovoltaics, you see a lot of stuff in that, but 6 years later, most of it is in that line. Concentrated solar power using mirrors and concentrators to create steam, to turn generators in the desert and can hold that heat even at nighttime is a little above that line, but now most of that's starting to come into line. I'll show you charts. And of course, onshore wind is totally on that. And notice hydro, some biomass, and onshore wind fall below that brown line, meaning they're lower cost than fossil fuels, or nuclear for that matter. And offshore wind is beginning to enter that box. And by the way, 6 years later is coming in finally. So all the renewables are becoming very, very competitive. And by the way, I just want to point out, biomass is 24 hours, geothermal is 24 hours, hydro is 24 hours, concentrated solar is 24 hours. And then the variable renewables, solar photovoltaics and onshore offshore wind with batteries or pump storage or compressed air and liquids or flywheels can become 24 hour and are doing that now.
And that's really the challenge, isn't it, Scott? About
that is the new challenge, but you'll see the big market thing. So I'm rushing through these slides to get through my half hour fast so we can have questions. This is a recent chart out of Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and this is looking at battery costs. Look at that top line going from about 2013 to 2019. Very competitive in many areas. And of course, photovoltaics with tracking or not tracking, meaning the panels follow the sun or don't. Offshore wind, onshore wind, which is one of the lowest cost energy generation. Look at those costs. I mean, that's the real game. And this is in 2018 real dollars. So this is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, another government entity that looks at, collects data only on electricity tied to the electric grid. So not what I do, commercial, industrial, or buildings, but they basically renewables have surpassed 22% of the nation's total installed capacity. So a fifth of our electricity, and it sees it dramatically expanding over fossil fuels. And so that's some data there for you. Another Federal Energy Regulatory Commission report of December 2019, neck to neck with natural gas generating capacity in 2019. We have surpassed natural gas and generation capacity now. And this is a nice little chart from the U.S. Energy Information Administration and EWG, looking at growth of coal, which is way down, obviously, natural gas, which is sort of arcing down, and wind and solar, which is going radically up. 2015 was the first time that jobs in solar energy surpassed the jobs in the extractive energy industries, oil, gas, coal, and nuclear, in fact. This is wind share of energy generation. This is from the American Wind Energy Association in 2018 data. And, you know, look at the Midwest, about a quarter North Dakota, South Dakota, over 25% Oklahoma, and some significant generation capacities all over the country, which is very exciting. And this is not including offshore. That's going to change the dynamics, because remember, offshore is the wind blows twice as much during the day, and it's closer to the population centers, the big cities, particularly on the East Coast. And so, because you don't have a lot of people in North Dakota, not to hurt anybody from that area. These are a nice chart of some of the wind projects completed or under development just in 2017, which they're all done now. Global offshore wind reaches a tipping point. This is looking at analysis by Intelstore LLC, a market intelligence firm, on data on offshore wind. These are the geothermal plants operating in the United States. We are the world's leader. And they're not just on the west, where you see a bunch of dots, but along the Appalachian chain. In fact, MIT did a study that showed that we have more geothermal under the oldest mountain range, the Appalachians, than out west. So we're going to be able to get that 24-hour power. This is Energy Information Agency in 2019 saying we have about 8,000 megawatts, 8 nuclear power plants teed up in the market. These are concentrated solar plants. You're going to see some pictures about it. The U.S. has about 2 gigawatts. Morocco has now approached a gigawatt. And China has over a gigawatt. India is ramping up. I think it's approaching a gigawatt. So we're seeing a lot, over a gigawatt in Chile. And so this is 2019 data, but 2020, South Africa, I think, is over a gigawatt. A gigawatt's a nuclear power plant worth, so of 24-hour power in the deserts. Global solar demand reached 10 gigawatts. This is March 2019. So 10 nuclear power plants worth of power and demand. I want to talk about hydro. There are not dams already erected that are technically able to have a turbine. And so we could, you do 12 nuclear power plants worth of energy just here in the United States, not building any new dams. Ocean energy, marine energy is my newest love technology. Tidal wave, all of that. So financing options. How do you finance these technologies? Today, we use power purchase agreements where the company comes in with investors. They own the systems. You sign a 20-year agreement, whether you're a utility or a commercial, industrial, or government entity, or a person, and you pay a rate that's lower than you pay from your electric grid. Leasing, something similar. If you can't, some states don't allow anybody to sell power, so you lease it for the same amount. Shared savings, mostly energy efficiency and solar water heating, geothermal heat pumps, where the company comes in, they finance it, you sign a contract for that energy, and it is less than you're paying for your utility bill. Certain counties and cities have commercial and residential PACE programs where they use your assessment, they reduce your assessment so you can get lower cost energy financed, and then you pay back the assessment when you sell your building 20 years, 30 years before. There's financing for MUSH markets, municipal, university, schools, and hospitals that we can apply to this. And of course, a couple of years ago, Congress passed these opportunity zones in lower income area, lower economic development areas, and we have a lot of opportunity zone finance projects. The tax incentives for solar is now 26%. That's for solar water heating, photovoltaics. And if you include batteries, you can include the batteries in that tax credit. It's ramping down to 2021 to 22%, and then it ramps down to 10%, but I expect Congress to probably extend in the 20s some point. Production tax credit for wind is 1.5 cents, and that ends this year, but I think, again, Congress is probably going to extend that. So these are the tax credits available. I forgot to mention solar. The big concentrated solar plants also get these tax incentives. Geothermal got an extenders package for their production credit. So there's some information on that. Biogas has two tax credits for it. So that's helping the more rural areas, well, and food processing areas in the East and West Coast too. The amount of money going into renewables is astounding. This is a great article on looking at impact investing, passing $12 trillion, $46.6 trillion in 2017. And so it's an astounding amount of money going to low carbon energy. This is 2020 in January. Blackrock, one of the biggest investment firms in the world, had put in $5.5 billion into wind and solar around the world and is amping that up. Carlyle Group, January 2020, same thing, $100 million in solar projects to just show where the money's going. What's driving in the United States a lot of this investment is different regulations. Compensation for folks who have distributed generation, therefore the utility has to put less investments into large power plants that of course raise the rates. How they value distributed generation, community solar, allowing folks that are renting buildings or in old buildings co-invest in a solar project and get those electrons. Demand charges we talked about to undo these higher costs, third-party ownership, roofing. So anyway, this just sort of gives you a sense of the different tactics regulators are doing to increase and understand the value of distributed generation. One of the biggest things for solar and small wind in particular is what's called net metering, meaning, let's just use a home for a second. If you're producing more than you use in these 38 states and plus the territories, you can sell back your electricity to the grid. Some cases you get the retail rate you're paying, some cases you get a lower rate. And so this allows more investment because you're getting some income from your extra power. If you can't do that, we'll talk about we're using batteries now. States have renewable energy portfolio standards. These are requirements for new electricity coming online. And so this is 29 states in Washington, D.C. have these things. And you get basically a higher rate. And sometimes it's through renewable energy credits or solar renewable energy credits, SRECs or RECs. Other ways, it's sometimes just higher costs for your electricity. But in either case, in these states are the best markets for solar and renewables. This is another report on what states are doing, increasing their renewables. These are 5 states. This is May of 2019. And this is another way to look at the state portfolio standards. These are states that are committing to 100% renewable energy. I have the March 27, 2020 on Arizona, but look at all these other states and when they're going to go to 100%. And so very, very exciting. And of course, that's what's going to attract investment. These are states that have climate change targets. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions, carbon and methane. So that also affects solar, methane, because you're intercepting it for biogas also is benefits, and of course wind. I want you to know that building codes, which are generally done at the state and local, state and municipal and county level, a lot of that code and the big cities like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. have very strong building codes. These are some of the labeling of building codes. ASHRAE listed at the bottom, which is the Professional Association of the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Cooling Industry, Department of Energy Residential, the Germany Commercial Building, United Kingdom Residential, that buyers now are going to see labeling and are seeing labeling on buildings to say, hey, when I rent or buy these buildings, what's the energy costs? And by the way, water costs as well. These are the appliance guides, and we have them on vehicles for miles per gallon. And this one is for refrigerators and air conditioners, so you know what your energy costs are for your appliances. This is a town in Japan of 100 that has 100% solar buildings, both solar water heating, photovoltaics, batteries, geothermal heat pumps. And the extra electricity coming off these buildings run the signal lights and the pipeline pumps for water, sewage, and fuels. This is a company in the U.S., Solar Strategies, that sell it outside Pennsylvania with solar water heating on top, photovoltaics, geothermal heat pumps, R30 insulation, double pane argon-filled windows, LED lights, and it comes with the washer and refrigerator because they're very energy efficient. These are pre-made and are just put on the foundation. 2 days later, you move in. This is my office building here in Arlington, Virginia, right where it used to be where Art Landers had his company till he moved away from me. But anyway, and this is R50 insulation, super insulating windows. You see photovoltaic roofing shingles, a wind turbine. You can barely see it on the monopole on the left-hand side. I have a web-enabled battery bank in the building and a hydrogen fuel cell in the back. And I do tours here. My home also is self-powered. These are the new roofing tiles by Tesla. These are all glass, and they have different kinds of them. And of course, it's very exciting. And they sort of have redone or come into line saying, hey, 50% of the houses are in homeowner associations that ban solar. Let's do something where they can't ban solar. These are shingles. They look gorgeous. This is a Swiss manufacturer, just came out with a roofing shingle, mostly looking at the historic building market that also bans solar. Looks pretty nice up there. So here's some information on that. This is the Tesla Powerwall battery bank. They broke open the market. They own it, you lease it. When it's done, they take it away. Absolutely cost effective. LG, a very huge company, has also developed that, as has Sonnen, the biggest battery manufacturer in Germany, and Pike Energy. But now I have about 11 different standardized battery banks I can use, first recommend to people for homes, which I don't do because I don't do residential, but also small businesses, commercial, industrial. These are big battery banks. This is a 1 megawatt one in California. These are solar films on windows. LED light bulbs, obviously, save 80% on energy. Solar daylighting, which are concentrators and reflectors to bring in full spectrum light without the heat. This is a example in Camp Pendleton Marine Air Corps Base on using it instead of 1,800 watt Klieg lights to repair the helicopters. Electrochromic glass, I have it on the back of my house, but this is in DC at the Dirty Habits Bar in the Hotel Monaco, and you can lighten and darken the glass with 12 volts of electricity. Saves air conditioning. This is solar thermal, using it to drive absorption air conditioners that work on natural gas. In fact, for a power plant in Texas, this zeroes out the use of natural gas by day when the pipelines are congested and the costs are high, and they work great. This is solar street lights. Hurricane Andrew ripping the roofs off of in Florida, and here's the street lights still up and working while the roofs were blown off. We have 7.4 billion people on the planet. 1.6 have no electricity. 1.8 have less than 10 hours a day, usually at night when they don't need it. Here's a solar-driven solar lighting system for a hut that they lease purchase from the cellular store. It costs them 30% less a month than kerosene, and they can also charge 2 cell phones. Very cost effective. They're selling about 180,000 of these a month. This is zero base. I have examples of this in my backyard, no less, in Arlington. This fits in a flatbed truck and immediately plops and drops down. Solar, in some cases wind, and it produces AC and DC current for remote applications. This is marine, a tidal turbine in Scotland. Scotland is the world leader in tidal turbines. Spain, Japan, Australia, China, United States are the top 5. And they have almost a gigawatt going in off of Scotland of 24-hour turbines. They don't spin fast, so you can have fish swim through it. A wonderful kind of energy. Here's another one in Moraine that was deployed in 2014. Wind farm, just so you can look at one, in 2011, 250 megawatts. This is offshore wind in the United States, Rock Island, also 2017, so you get a sense how they are. This is a giant, one of the larger photovoltaic plants in Nevada, 140 acres for Nellis Air Force Base. These are the concentrating solar plants in California. They're up to 500 megawatts now. These are solar troughs. They're curved ones. This is 280 megawatts in Arizona. This is what they look like. And the light focuses on a glass tube filled with a synthetic oil, and it is pumped in and heats water and creates steam. I'm finishing up now. This is the map of a company 3-tier in Seattle. They have PhD hydrologists, oceanographers, meteorologists, and supercomputers. They can tell you solar, wind, and water anywhere in the world. And wind, what the hub height is to get the best wind, meaning how far up you need to go. And we have companies that have there are about 13 companies now where I can get a picture on Google Maps of a building roof and then look at the seasonal and daily solar on the roof, see what trees, buildings, or hills block the solar, and tell the installers where the hell to put the solar panels, either solar water heating or photovoltaics. And then just to end up with my last slide, this is the only planet that anybody has seen that looks like this, and we live on it.
It's our
spaceship. It's up to all of us to realize this is our nest.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping with the pandemic and the climate changing and everything else, we realize that this is the most people have lived on this planet in history by far, most of it in one lifetime. And, when I was young, Art, this is true, when I was young, we had 2.5 billion people on this planet, and now we have over 7.4 billion. We have more than tripled what's on our planet in one lifetime. So we have to understand that. And with that, I'm ending, and questions go to Art that I can help answer. Thank you.
Scott, what about jobs? When you look at like the coal industry and now with the oil industry, I think a lot of times people who work in that industry are very concerned about employment and how are they going to get paid, how they're going to make a living. Has that been a challenge to retool or to retrain the employees in this field of renewable energy?
Well, thank you, Art. Yeah, well, first of all, I saw the chart on how much solar has job increase, but we have about 3 million jobs in the United States from energy efficiency, all the renewables, and energy storage, and smart sensors and controls tied to the industry. And they're in every single state. Now, oil and gas, and coal are in a handful of each states, and that's where the big jobs are. And of course, as you see, we're increasing. So yes, we have programs we call workforce training programs in about half the states to take people who are working in industries from cellular and data center kind of jobs where they're just transferring different focuses to coal miners have lost their jobs, and oil developers and oil well installers, and we're training them to do these kind of tasks. And what's nice is, you're not sending people in the ground to get black lung. These are above ground, doing great jobs. They're healthier. They're some of the highest paying jobs, and they're in every single state. So the economic impacts are huge.
You had mentioned a little bit earlier about homeowners, for example, being able to lease the renewable energy equipment, solar panels, that type of thing. One of the questions that we have in the insurance industry, the insurance companies often are concerned about, yes, a wind turbine is purchased from company X, but how reliable is company X? In other words, there's not a long history. There's not a long track record of how reliable their equipment has been. And I think that may be one issue that the industry has to address, is how secure in the reliability of the manufacturing companies.
Well, first to start, for solar water heating, we actually have a solar rating and certification corporation, nonprofit, overseen by state governments. We have testing facilities at the Florida Solar Energy Center at the University of Central Florida, up in Canada, and I think in Arizona as well. and they actually put out a directory. It's www.srcc.org, I believe it is. And so for solar water heating equipment, I think it's pretty clear. And the water tanks also have their own certification generically, not just solar ones.
Mhm.
For photovoltaic panels, the United States uses United Laboratories, which does everything in electric in a house, and Europe has their own one in Japan. And so the only issue you have to do, and I have to make sure my projects, there are scam companies that put the UL label on, so you really have to have someone to check it out. For companies themselves that install it, by the way, 99% of the failures are not technology. They're installed incorrectly. So you want companies that have at least a 3-year record, that give you a range of customers that you can email and pictures and stuff like that. If they're not giving that to you, you don't want to use them. And the other thing is there are rating, nonprofit rating approaches. One is called NAPCEP, the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners for solar and small wind, where these installers have to go through our certification program and training program. They actually have to be watched putting on equipment, so you don't ruin the roofing
Sure.
warranty and
Yeah.
things like that, and you don't cause other unanticipated problems. You don't short out the house circuit breaker box or bring down your utility. Bad. So we have actually all of that in place, but people have to know they exist, and that education is a very big problem. And I think each state or region has a solar energy industry association chapter of companies which have certain ethic requirements and have a lot of this data. But I think one of the things from GW that I'll work with you, Art, is make sure all those links are there so they can be distributed through your company and others so people know they exist.
Great, Scott. That's fantastic. When it comes for investors who would like to participate more in the renewable energy field, do maybe 4 or 5 names come to mind, like that trade on the stock exchanges?
Well, you mean companies to invest in? Is that what your question is?
Yes.
Well, actually, I hate doing that because tomorrow that can tank out or be
Right.
bought or whatever. So, but yes, we have probably about 80 companies on the stock exchange, again, in energy storage, all the energy efficiency, all the renewable energy, and all the software that links all that stuff up. So you look into those portfolios and do it. Most of them do very well because, as you saw from all the slides I showed everybody, the market is expanding. And again, I want to pick up on something that you opened up with, Art.
Mhm.
Uh, except for biomass, everything is renewable, free. It's not globalized. No one can, there's no cartels, there's no one that can play the market. It's pretty static. So and that's why I blend technologies, and I can cover all the resources in an arbitrage. We call these microgrids to deal with that and store it in batteries and use it any time. So we're beginning to see that. And even biomass, most of the generation is used at the source of the waste, a sewage treatment plant, a manure lot, a cannery, where it's coming out every damn day. So it's there, it's not globalized, and you turn it into a gas or gasification, and you generate electricity with it. So it's using up the waste streams, which are important, meaning it doesn't have to go to landfill or doesn't get in our water. You use it for energy, and in many cases for fertilizer and building materials. So it's pretty cool.
How are the utility companies and also the federal, state, and local governments interacting with renewable energy companies? Are they a hindrance or a help?
Well, that's a great question. Let's talk about local governments first. For the most part, states, and there's a handful that are not sympathetic, not surprising, mostly are in fossil states, but over 35 states are enthusiastic about energy efficiency, renewables, energy storage. and have created renewable portfolio standards, all kinds of utility regulations to support it, because it is a job creator and they see it. Local governments have even been more excited, cities and towns and counties, because not only does it create jobs, it lowers air and water pollution. So they have to meet the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. Well, here's a way, they don't have to spend any money on it. The private sector invests it, and the air is cleaner and the water is cleaner. Local government's noise lowers the use of noise. You don't have diesel engines running or power plants smoking away. So they've been very, very enthusiastic, and we have a list and lists of those places. The federal government, I joke, has been, on and off depending on who's leading it and who's in control. But again, these industries are getting so big now that it's hard for them to say, we're only going to help coal or oil. We're not going to help all our energy industries. So I see the world changing. It's going to change more and more as these companies get bigger and bigger. And remember, we have very big companies and very big players like Warren Buffett and others that are going in. And some of the biggest buyers of the technology itself for projects are Amazon, Google, Apple. So big tech firms that don't want to rely and have any shocks on what costs of energy are.
You know, we talked about renewable energy, and this final question has to do with hydrogen power. And you mentioned that you have that at your house, and also I've seen over in Japan that they're putting an emphasis on cars and trucks powered by hydrogen, I believe. And how do you feel about that field?
Oh, I am very excited on hydrogen. It's actually the sort of one, like marine energy, tidal wave, and ocean currents, one of the unloved but really important sources. Japan has a hydrogen corridor as a national policy. By the way, so does California as a state policy. Hydrogen can be made many different ways, from biogas, of course. Most of it's made from natural gas now, but it can also be by electrolyzing water, putting electricity into water and breaking the oxygen-hydrogen bond. Think of all that offshore wind, and if you can't use the wind electricity for some reason, why not make hydrogen, which can be used day and night for power, or in vehicles, particularly trucks. It's going to be hard to do heavy-duty electric trucks, but hydrogen trucks will be great. And of course, power plants of all sorts. We use it in the space shuttle, so it's well known. And what's wonderful, and fuel cells are the technology we use to convert biogas or liquid fuels or natural gas to hydrogen, electricity, and then to electricity. But the only emission coming out of them is 100% water.
That's
so it's very exciting. So and by the way, the airline industry, because of the space industry, is seriously looking at hydrogen generation in addition to other kinds of biofuels. And I expect that it's going to take off also over the next decade. So hydrogen is very important because it can be made from almost any renewable resource. Remember, the world is covered 90% in water, so the whole point being that, and a lot of that is not pure, and you can make hydrogen from unpure water, great. And it has a multitude of uses: transportation, electric generation, heat. And in fact, United Kingdom has a multi-billion-dollar project to generate hydrogen from offshore wind to replace natural gas from Russia, so that they can heat buildings in the cool weather. So it's going to be a future driver, and it's a very exciting one.
Scott, I want to thank you today. I really, really enjoyed your presentation, and we want to thank you so much for appearing today, and we'll talk some more, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Art. Thank you for creating this kind of awareness. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.